2025. My name is Camden Bucey, and we should be live on YouTube. I always got to check when we're going live. It looks like we are. Very good. We are live broadcasting to our YouTube channel here. It is Reformed Forum Live, and we've got a really great panel today to talk about some new projects and an upcoming event. Let me go around the horn real briefly and introduce everybody to you. We have with us first Jonathan Master, who serves as president of Greenville Presbyterian Theological Seminary. Jonathan, it's great to have you with us. Thanks for joining us.
Camden, thanks very much for having me. Always great to reconnect.
You bet. We, for those who are watching, we may or may not be seeing Jonathan in green screen. So we understand that that's going on. This isn't some sort of overt or covert branding play where he's just putting a green screen over the Greenville president. This isn't the right shade of green anyway for that. So if this video isn't coming through on the live stream, we didn't, the show must go on. So we're recording. He can see himself, and hopefully we can get the video eventually, but we're working with what we can at the minute. Riverside is either absolutely amazing or very frustrating, and today it's got a little bit of the frustration, but we're happy to have you, Jonathan. Most importantly, we can hear you and you can hear us, so we're happy to have you. We also have David Noe, Dr. David Noe. Everyone knows David Noe. We've had him on the program several times. He's Emeritus Professor of Classics at Calvin University. He's also a minister in the OPC and an experienced translator of Reformation and post-Reformation works, and he's got his fingers in a lot of different projects. Welcome, David. It's great to see you. Thanks for joining us today.
Camden.
Yeah.
It's good to see you too. Thanks for having me on.
You bet. I'm excited. We're going to be talking about a project that David and company have been involved in, and one of his colleagues we are welcoming today is Tyson Watson. We have with us, who teaches 7th and 8th grade Latin at Covenant Classical School, living in Fort Worth, Texas. Welcome, Tyson. It's great to have you too.
Yeah, good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Exciting. We may welcome some other colleagues in a few minutes, but for now, we're really excited to talk. In just a minute, we're going to be speaking about Calvin's Latin Bible. David and company have been working with and producing. David runs Latin Per Diem, and there's a really helpful online resource and lots of opportunities to learn Latin and to increase your knowledge there and Greek. Amen. For learning more of the Bible and classics and studying the Reformed tradition particularly. And they have an excellent new project, Calvin's Latin Bible, in a digital state-of-the-art format. We'll talk about that in a minute. But first up, we wanted to speak about an event that's going to be happening just next week, March 11th through 13th. At Greenville Presbyterian Theological Seminary. They'll have a pre-conference as usual. The theme of their conference this year, the whole conference is typically called the Confessional Conference, but the theme of the conference this year is the pastor, his call, character, and work. And as I mentioned, that's going to begin March 13th and go through March 11th and go through March 13th at Heritage Bible Church in Greer, South Carolina. Jonathan, we had Pat Daly, your vice president, come on about a month ago to talk about the event. Carlton Wynn is going to be speaking at the event, I think Wednesday morning. And he spoke a little bit about his lecture, but I'd love for you to tell us about what you have in store. And if people are listening to this, perhaps they have enough time to register and show up in Greer on Tuesday.
Well, that's right. People can come and actually register at the door. Most people register ahead of time, and so we're already really encouraged by the number of people who have expressed interest and who will be our guests next week. But yeah, there's still time. You could still show up on Tuesday and register for the conference and sit in on all the sessions. So we're really excited that Carlton's coming. We were thrilled that he was able to make it. I can walk through each of the sessions, but just in terms of the big picture, you're right. The subject is the pastor. And, we were a little bit apprehensive when we were planning this out a couple of years ago, because we knew that some people who might normally come to our confessional conference might be put off by that. They might assume that it's really a conference just for pastors. And certainly there's going to be a lot of application directly to those who are in the ministry. But the reality is it's still a conference for families, for Christians in general. We are going to be discussing the topic of the pastor, but it's our contention that we all need to understand better the pastoral office, and God has given us pastors for our own good. And so it's beneficial for all of us to spend a few days to think about how God has designed the pastorate to work and what it is that pastors are called to do.
Yeah, that's really useful. Everyone has a pastor, and everyone not only should know about what they do and what they're called to do, but also know how to pray for and support them. So there's all sorts of application there. I'm excited to come. We're going to be one of the exhibitors as usual. Reform Forum will be there, but I like popping into the sessions as well. And Jonathan, I've said it before, but your conference, the Greenville conference, is really quite unique. I'm sure everyone would want to say that about their conference, but there's some magic, and I'm not using that in a pagan way. It's just a figure of speech. But there's some sort of magic to this event and to your community, because in many ways, it's not only a homecoming of sorts, but it's a homecoming that includes a much wider community of people and families than even alums. And hey, it's something special, and you really can catch that vibe when you're there.
Yeah, it's one of the special things about it. It really is a little reunion time for our alumni and their families, and you get to see their families and the growth and change there. But the thing that makes it even better is that it feels like the Greenville family kind of grows every year. So it is a lot of, there are a lot of people who have deep ties to the school, graduates and others, but really we find that a lot of people come from all over the place, and there is just a real sense of warm fellowship that I think you've picked up on, and we hope that the Lord blesses us the same way this year.
Absolutely. No, I think he will. I trust that he will. I'm excited to be there. Looking forward to the event. We just welcomed Joan Crist to the live stream. Hi, Joan. It's great to have you. We'll introduce you in a second and get talking. We're talking right now with Jonathan Master, president of Greenville Presbyterian Theological Seminary, about their conference, just for the next few minutes before we get to Calvin's Latin Bible. But Jonathan, I was wondering, just briefly, if you might give us a thumbnail sketch of some or all, whatever you'd like to do, of the speakers and maybe what they'll be talking about next week.
Sure. I'll do a quick run through. So we have a pre-conference this year, just like we did last year with you guys. This year, we're partnering with Banner of Truth on that pre-conference. And so excited about that. And then in the actual conference itself, Ryan McGraw is going to start us off and talk about the Spirit in the Scriptures. Then Jeff Stuyvesant is going to speak about John Bunyan and the pastoral ministry in the Pilgrim's Progress. And that, I should say, that's one of the things that we try to do. We try to mix in some historical addresses with some expositional ones. And so Jeff's will be more on the historical end. And then that evening, Terry Johnson from Independent Presbyterian Church in Savannah is going to be speaking on the broad topic, but the important topic, why God gives us pastors. So really looking forward to sitting under his ministry as well. And then the next day, we're starting off with all of our friend Carlton Wynn, the man of the hour. He's going to speak on the call of the pastor. And then John Tweedale from Reformation Bible College on the character of the pastor. And then another historical one, David Gilbert, will be speaking on J.C. Ryle. And then that evening, I'm going to be speaking as well. And then the next morning, this is our last day, Thursday the 13th, Ian Hamilton on the work of the pastor, and then Craig Troxel on the heart of the hearer. We wanted to end specifically aiming an address at those of us who sit under the regular preaching of the word. And so Craig, of course, with all his very helpful material on the heart, is I think uniquely equipped to speak on that. So that's the rundown. In between, as you know, Camden, there are all kinds of different activities, get-togethers, Q&As, fellowship events, and things like that. So those are the main tent pegs of the few days, but there's a whole lot else that's happening at the same time.
Absolutely. Also, lots of books for sale. You get great deals. A lot of publishers are there. There's quite a few exhibitors. So we love going as an exhibitor for that reason, because quite a few people are walking around and willing to talk, but it's just fun. It's really fun.
Yeah.
And so what are you expecting? I heard rumors that you might top 700. Is that still the case?
Yeah, right now it's at about 750. Usually
Ooh.
in the evenings, we have more people come out because they're off from work or they're
Right.
just local folks. So usually in the evenings we get a bump of about another 100. But right now registered, it's as of I think this morning 750,
Wow.
and we'll see in the next few days. But yeah, so that's
Wow.
encouraging too. Like I said at the beginning, we weren't. We've tried to convey to people that this isn't just a conference for pastors, even though that's the topic this year, the pastor. So
Right.
it looks like we'll have a real wide range of people there.
Let me put you on the spot real quick. Nothing weird, but our mutual friend, Chad Vegas, just posted a video. He works with Radius International. He partners with Greenville. And Greenville, along with Radius, will be hosting, I believe it's, I don't have it in front of me, but I think the title of it was a missions midweeker in April. Is that right? Would you like to pitch that? Let people know about that. Is that still available?
I'd be glad to. Yeah, there are still a few spots available for the April one, and then we have another one coming up the next fall. We're going to try to do these twice a year. Basically, that's aimed at those who are in church leadership, so mostly pastors, but also some ruling elders, people who chair missions committees, that kind of thing, to talk to them about how they should, about ways they can think about missions and about ways they can support the work of the church in missions. So we think the Missions Midweeker is going to be a great event. And again, we're trying to intentionally keep it relatively small so there's lots of time for discussion. Yeah. But yeah, Chad will be out for that. Michael Morales will be speaking. Brooks Bucer will be there. We have a whole range of people from that world. And it should be a good time of learning and growing together and discussing. And one of the catalysts for it was we just started talking to so many pastors who had questions about missions and sort of felt like they were out on an island, not exactly sure what the best ways were to oversee their missions budget or their missions program. And so we'll try to get into the nuts and bolts of that, as well as just the big picture.
All fun. Well, it's good for people to know that that's going on and that Greenville and Radius are working together to address these important topics. But of course, the conference next week, March 11th through 13th at Heritage Bible Church in Greer, South Carolina. It's being hosted by none other than Greenville Presbyterian Theological Seminary. The theme, the pastor, his call, character, and work. You can find out more information at gpts.edu. Jonathan, thanks for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Hey, Camden, always good to see you. Looking forward to seeing you in person next week. And thanks for the opportunity to share a little bit.
You bet. We'll talk to you soon, and let's connect. We'll talk next week. And if anyone's there at the conference, please stop by our table. We'd love to meet with you and chat. Thanks, Jonathan.
Yeah, thanks, brother. See ya.
All right. Well, that's fun. Thank you, everyone, for sitting in, and apologize to people watching for any of the technical oddities. But all of our remaining guests seem to be functioning properly. And I'm really excited to be bringing to you. We've mentioned and introduced David Noe and Tyson Watson, but now we also have with us Dr. Joan Crist. Joan, if I'm not mistaken, do you teach Latin at Thea Bowman Leadership Academy in Gary? Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Oh, great. So you're just a little bit around the lake from us. So not very far from me. I'm up in, right now, Libertyville, Illinois. And David, you're on the complete other side of the lake. So we need to get a ferry that we can, spend more time together. If we had I don't know if it's not in our budget. I don't know if you've got one in your budget, but if we had a boat, that'd be pretty fun. We could go.
Yeah, there is a ferry, that goes from Green Bay to Ludington. It's called the Wolverine, but I don't think it has commenced spring travel yet. So
no, and that's a bit too far north for me. We got to figure out some other way to get it done. Well, I don't mind the north. It's just I don't think the ferry is going to be saving me a whole lot of time if I.
No, I don't think so.
If I have to drive that far north and then drive that far south. But today we're going to be speaking about Calvin's Latin Bible. David sent me an email and let me know about this new project. You can find out information about it at latinperdiem.com/CLB. And there's also a YouTube launch video where David explains the new project. But David, I'd love for you to introduce this new thing to our listeners. I think quite a few people will be excited and interested to hear about what this is.
Right. Thank you. Well, I'm going to be brief because I really want Joan and Tyson to get a chance to talk
great.
about their
Please.
contribution to this project, because I think that would be much more interesting than what I have to say. So in the 1990s, my former professor, Richard Weavers at Calvin College, he inherited Ford Lewis Battle's key cards, key punch cards, the old way of doing computer system. And Battles had put together from Calvin's commentaries on key punch cards all of Calvin's translations, which he would use to preface his commentary. So if he's commenting on the Psalms, for example, he would translate all of the Psalm from Hebrew before giving his commentary, right? And he did this because, like many men of the 16th century, he was dissatisfied with some of Jerome's translation choices. The first person to do this, of course, was Erasmus in 1516 with his Novum Instrumentum, when he took the New Testament and he issued a Greek edition, and then he put en face on the other side, he put his own Latin translation, which differed from Jerome in many important respects. This was quite groundbreaking. So then Calvin and many others, both Protestant and to a lesser extent Catholic, followed Erasmus in critiquing Jerome. So Calvin, every book of the Bible that he commented on, and it wasn't all of them, as you know, he first gave his own Latin translation from the Hebrew or the Greek. So my professor, Dr. Weavers, he put this all together based on Ford Lewis Battle's work, and he printed a very small run of what he called Calvin's Latin Bible. And I have a copy, maybe there were 200 made. He published it basically out of his garage, something called Digamma Publishers. Digamma is an extinct Greek letter that's no longer in use. And,
oh man! Well, I got to stop you there. We can't run by that. What sound was it coupled with?
It was the sound "wa." It was the sound "wa," and you know the gamma looks like an inverted L.
Sure.
So the digamma looked like an F, and it had 2 marks, right? So you know the English word video, right? It begins with the wid sound, and the English word wit, right? So wit and wid, and the Greek word that means to see, also wid, they're all cognates. They come from the same Proto-Indo-European ancestor, and that digamma is at the beginning of the Greek form.
Oh wow!
So, anyway, so
bonus. That's going to be the YouTube short right there, David.
All right. So Weavers put this out, right? And so I inherited all of his electronic files, and he stipulated you can do with this whatever you want, as long as all the proceeds go to the Calvin College Classics department. So I agreed to that, but of course, as you know, the Calvin College Classics department is defunct. So a couple of years ago, I recruited a student named April Volzer, who's a double major in Latin and computer science, and we began the work on an app which would take all of this material and present it in a very accessible format. But then we slept on it for a few years, and just this past summer, I think maybe it was Joan's instigation, we revived this project and got a very nice gift from a friend in Pennsylvania. He doesn't want me to give his full name, but his first name is Matthew. And he gave us a nice financial gift to get started on this. And so we have been diligently working with a team of, I think, 8. So in addition to Joan and Tyson, we have two other researchers, my daughter Jillian, and a young woman from here in Michigan named Adrian, who was my student at Calvin. And then my virtual assistant Mishka, who is offshore. She does all of the audio editing, which is an enormous task.
Tell me about it.
And then April, who is the very, very accomplished programmer.
Wow. That's amazing. That's a big, large team effort. And it's wonderful to see. You almost feel really wonderful to have this out and be able to talk about it as a finished product.
Yeah, I'm really excited, and I don't use the E word, liberally. So,
well, tell me about how you met your colleagues here. Maybe you could pass things off to them or lead them on and get prime the pump with conversation here.
Tyson, tell us something about your involvement in this project, please, would you?
Oh, sure. I'd be happy to. That's a let's see. Well,
You're
when I
a
first
little
started-
muted. Is anyone else having trouble hearing Tyson?
It's a little quiet. I'll do what I can here. Maybe I can
Okay.
turn that up, or yeah, it's jacked up. So I mean,
Am I quiet?
yeah, you'll be all right. We'll try to make it work, or you could just speak louder. That works too. Go ahead.
Don't
Sure.
freak out. My daughter is napping, so I don't.
Oh.
You don't want to wake a sleeping baby, as they say.
Nope.
So, yeah. So when I began studying Latin, I heard about Dr. Noe through Latin per Diem and some of the other work that he had done, like the Junius translation. So, like any upstart young guy, I reached out to him via email and asked him for some tips on learning Latin and Greek as well. But anyways, that's how we got to know each other. And after having gone up to Michigan for a couple of summers in a row and studying Latin with Dr. Noe, he asked me if I'd be interested in helping out with this project. And so that's how I got involved in the project, basically through bugging Dr. Noe incessantly and asking him for help with Latin studies.
Yeah, Tyson is too modest. He's a really excellent Latinist. He only started, I think, within the last 3 to 4 years. He has made monumental strides, like the Colossus of Rhodes, right?
Wow.
He has 1 foot on the continent of ignorance and 1 foot on the continent of knowledge, and he's doing incredible work. Really, he is.
Wow.
And so, Tyson, you have worked on the Book of Romans, right? And you're currently on Exodus. What else? You worked through the Psalms. What else have you done?
I did 10 or 11 Psalms. I did James, Romans, and now I'm working on Exodus.
Right. And could you explain for Camden and his audience what it means to work on those texts? What are we doing, actually?
Yeah, sure. So, like Dr. Noe was saying, we have a large, very, very large digital file of text that is very, what shall we say, difficult to read. It'd be very difficult to just try to scroll through the text and read. So basically what we're doing is we are collecting that text. We are adding long vowel marks on top of the text and checking it against a printed edition of Calvin's commentaries. So we are taking those digital files and making them presentable, basically, editing them.
So the printed edition is the Skipper edition, right? And is that 1672? I think that's...
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So this Dutchman, Camden, named Skipper, he made a critical edition of all of Calvin's commentaries. From the years 1672 to, I think, 77. Joan can correct me if I'm off. And so we're comparing Weaver's electronic file to that to make sure that we have a really accurate reading. And Tyson, what's this business of Mancra, of long marks?
So in Latin, some vowels are naturally long, and that affects the way you pronounce the word in Latin. And so we are making the text more accessible and easy to read by adding the long marks. And most Latin texts that you read do not have the long marks, but it's incredibly helpful to have them because, for example, certain verbs in Latin are only distinguished by the length of the vowels, tenses, things like this. So if you don't have the long marks, it could be confusing, but having them is really helpful.
Sure. I think a lot of pastors who might be watching would understand what it's like to read Hebrew without the points. Without the vowel points, and sometimes you can make it out, but even if all the root letters are still the same or all the consonants are the same, there might be 2 different words, and you just have to know that. So having the marks would be really helpful.
Yeah. Isn't this guy Tyson sharp? That was a fantastic answer. That was a really accurate.
You're passing you didn't know, but you're having an impromptu comprehensive exam on a live stream.
Well, Joan will attest to the quality of Tyson's answer. It was very precise.
That's good.
So he mentioned, some verbs you can only tell by the quantity. A good example is the verb invenio, which means to find. So invenit is the present tense. He finds. But invenit is the perfect tense. He found. Right? So I'm holding up, my Android phone here so you can see the app. And on the app, we have a toggle switch so that you can turn the long marks on and off.
Really?
So maybe you want to read it without the long marks because you're pretty confident in your ability to pronounce it correctly, you can turn them off.
Wow.
But maybe you want the long marks so you can turn them on.
This is a nerd question, but we're way in the nerd weeds already. Well, Joan, I'd love to hear about your work too, but really quick, David. I mean, maybe there's a question for the programmer, but I'm curious how you encoded this text to be able to do that.
I have no idea.
Okay, I'm wondering if the programmer, remind me of the name, was it April?
April.
Yeah. I'm wondering if she is doing some sort of just a basic filter to filter the Unicode, or if there's some sort of a markup language or something.
I have no idea.
That's intriguing. That's
I'm
really
sure,
interesting.
Camden, that you, in preparation for this, you downloaded the app and spent several hours with it. So
of course.
You probably noticed that the design is clean, intuitive, and really
it looks nice.
Functional.
Yeah.
She did an amazing job. Oh, I also didn't mention the graphic designer, a woman in our congregation named Melissa, who did all the graphic design, and I think she did a great job.
That's great.
Joan is doing maybe more work than I am, so I would really like to hear from her as well as to her contribution.
Well, I feel like that's 3 times you've thrown me under the bus, Dr. Noe. I distinctly remember getting an email from you last summer telling me about this project, and it was just going to be the Psalms. And I said, well, how fast do we want to do this? You said 3 to 5 Psalms per week. And I thought, well, this is probably going to take us about a year to do the Psalter. So I was like, okay, I can handle that even when school starts.
Right.
But then sometime in the fall, it became, okay, we want the Psalter done by Christmas. We're going to do the whole Bible. So Dr. Noe brought on board a team of absolutely brilliant young scholars to really speed the work along. My role at this point is just to be one of the many layers of proofreading and proof listening for the texts and the audio files. I don't know if there are any other specific questions you'd want me to answer about the work.
Well, thank you, Joan. I think it's really good to point out that a project like this is so vulnerable, susceptible to errors. It has become really complicated, which we didn't expect back in July when we were going to work through 3 Psalms per month or something like that. Because not only does the text have to be checked against Skipper and sometimes against one of Calvin's, editions printed in his lifetime, if there's any variation, but then the audio that I record has to be checked as well. And so our friend Mishka, she takes the raw audio file that I record in a mic that's very similar to the one you have, and she cuts it up nicely to make it sound good. And then Joan listens to it very carefully, and if I mispronounce a single syllable, she catches it and says at minute 3:25 you got the syllable wrong, and then she's very modest. She says, don't bother to fix it. And then I say, no, I have to fix it because we can't unleash this error on the world. Then I fix it. Then Mishka re-edits it. Then she splices it back in. Then Joan listens to it again. So I'm sure it's still not flawless, and probably never a million people will listen to it, but we want to have pride in our work, so we're trying to make it as close to perfect as it possibly can be. Joan also devised this comprehensive spreadsheet in Google Sheets, which has all of these fail safes. I don't know if you can grant me screen share, but if you want to, I can show the audience what it looks like. I think
it'll let you do it if you want. I don't know if I have to give permission.
What do you mean?
Why don't you try it? Maybe I shouldn't tell you this.
So where do I take it over?
I think at the bottom there's a share. Let me know if you don't see that. I'll do what I can.
Share my screen.
Yeah.
Yes. All right.
This is compelling audio. Look at that. Look at that. It's Google Sheets.
All right. There it is. It says trying to connect. So here on the bottom tab, Joan put this together. You can see Genesis. So we have, is the text typed? Is it checked? Is it perfect? Is it checked? Are there comments? Are the comments resolved? Was it recorded? Was the recording edited? Was the recording perfect? Was the recording checked for errors? Was it re-recorded? Were the errors fixed? And then a final listening or check of the re-edited version.
This is like there's a well-known, best-selling book. I don't know how well-known it is, but there was a book I read called The Checklist Manifesto, How to Get Things Right, by a guy named Atul Gawande. And this seems very much, if anyone's a pilot out there, I'm not, but I've been on a little plane before, and the pilot always has this checklist of things to check beforehand. This is reminiscent of that. I love this.
That's what we're doing. So you can see Genesis is done. Exodus is in progress. Samuel's in progress. Psalms is done. Lamentations, the text is done. And the person puts their initials there. Joel is done and checked, but not recorded. See, we threw in a few small books just to make ourselves feel like we're making progress. Mark is done. Tyson did all of Romans. Let's see if Romans is going to show up here. Doesn't seem like Romans is showing up so well.
Yeah, we're having some connectivity issues.
Yeah. In any event, we get the
visualization. It's a great system. Wow. So in some sense, Joan, you're kind of serving also as a bit of a project manager in this. Is that accurate?
No. I'm
quality control engineer. Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
I'm just a volunteer. I do what I can. I think David is the one who's apportioning the tasks, and
sure.
Dr. Noe, I'm sorry, apportioning the tasks.
You should call me David, Joan.
He'll email me when he wants me to listen to something, and
I see.
I can't stress how grateful I am to be a part of this project. I guess I do want to share, I'll make it as brief as I can, how I encountered Dr. Noe and his work, and why this project particularly excites me. I used to be Roman Catholic. I was a professor of systematic theology at a small Roman Catholic college in Indiana. But I lost that position. I was pressured to resign after I took a side in a conflict within the Roman Catholic Church, very publicly and polemically. So there was a very painful series of events. But I was invited by a school where I got a part-time job to teach Latin, quite unexpectedly. I didn't expect them to ask me to teach that. But in order to get the teaching license, I had to pass a very challenging exam. And I only had a background from high school and reading medieval scholastic text. So in the course of looking for resources online to help me prepare, I just happened across the Latin per diem videos. Wow. And just by chance, I thought, well, that looks good. Daily Latin lessons in 4 minutes or less. Just happened to click on the video. So it was really quite by accident that I ended up encountering Dr. Noe. And after the exam, I got into some of his online Zoom classes just to keep trying to develop my skills. And then he offered a class on Theodore Beza, which I didn't know who Beza was, but I took the class, and about halfway through the class, Beza persuaded me that the Reformed faith is the true one.
Amen.
So I was drawn to the faith through it, and it's really because of Latin per diem and Dr. Noe's instruction that I have a job. I never expected to get a full-time job in education ever again. So I'm incredibly grateful and very, very grateful to have the opportunity to work on this project.
Wow.
And part of what I appreciate about it is that it's kind of, for me, an alternative, a Protestant alternative to the Roman Catholic Liturgy of the Hours. As you probably know, the Liturgy of the Hours is an ancient form of daily prayer based on the Psalms. It goes back at least to the patristic era. But in Roman Catholicism, it's been kind of encrusted and embroidered with a lot of different things, antiphons and prayers involving Mary and the saints and extra readings and things for liturgical seasons. And I can't do all of that anymore, but it was a form of prayer that I loved, and I still like to pray the Psalms. So to have this resource, which enables one to listen to the Psalms in Latin, to read them in Latin, and I find Dr. Noe's spoken Latin to be very beautiful. It is just a real blessing. So both to be able to be involved in the project and to have the app to use are a wonderful blessing for me, and I hope that they will be for others. I've been a little bit alarmed, I guess, over the past couple of years at reading about or seeing or even talking to people who have been drawn away from the Reformed faith toward Roman Catholicism. Yeah. And I think sometimes it's because they feel that the Roman Catholic Church offers a deeper sense of connection to the theological tradition and a more beautiful liturgy. But I think we have both of those things in the Reformed faith, and we have them even more. And this app is just a wonderful example of both. We get to read the Psalms in Latin, a language that could be considered a sort of spine of the theological tradition. in a translation written by a doctor of the church, John Calvin. So it's kind of like, and it can be a beautiful liturgy if you want it to be for you personally. So I hope that the app will become something that will keep people's hearts in the Reformed faith, perhaps, or even draw people to the faith who are thinking about it.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing that, Joan. It's so wonderful. I was just reminded of something I was working on and discussing this afternoon about Calvin's involvement with the Reformation. Obviously, Martin Luther, very well known as historians will identify the beginning of the Reformation starting when he nailed his 95 Theses in 1517. And he was very much dealing with the doctrine of justification. But Calvin, also picking up on the doctrine of justification, pushed the Reformation even further with a Reformation of worship, and it just reminds me of all that. And I think your story is tremendously compelling. That moves me a lot. I mean, it just gives me pause to hear that. And I'm very thankful for your willingness to share that and to be part of this project and to share to all the people that are listening, just so that they can understand the significance of this and of understanding our rich tradition and heritage. And these aren't just intellectual exercises, right? They're meant to help us to grow and deepen our understanding of and knowledge of our Savior, and to affect our hearts and minds. So that's wonderful, Joan. Thank you. David, what was that like for you to be part of that story? That must be really,
it's deeply
really
humbling.
amazing.
It's
Amen.
deeply humbling. And Joan is a very modest, godly person. And so it's good to have friends like her and Tyson and others to work on this together. What could be more satisfying? Whether one person or 100 persons downloads it has been. And I'll admit I have ambition. I want success for the things I work on, but it's deeply satisfying that it would be useful. Specifically, one thing that she said, I've encountered a lot of young people in the last 25 years or so of teaching at various colleges and seminaries who are very drawn to Catholicism and the Eastern Church because of the intellectual tradition. And it would be foolish to deny that those places have an intellectual tradition.
Right.
Of course they do. But the Protestant faith has a tradition of erudition and learning, specifically in the languages, the humanities, and how those things serve the scriptures. I don't need to repeat everything that Joan said, which is also very comforting and motivating for our own, study and service.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can see my picture of Theodore Beza back there on the wall.
I can see it. I identify it now.
Yeah, I don't know if it's an icon, but the reason it's there,
it's not three-dimensional, David, so it's okay, right?
While I'm sitting here, Beza's gaze is over here telling me get to work. And when I'm over there on the couch, which you can see, I have a picture of Isaac Casaubon. Casaubon was a very important scholar who was Beza's student. And if I'm sitting over there, Casaubon is looking at me saying, get to work. So, yeah.
You remind me, I have your volume on Beza, the collected volume, sitting on my
Beza 500.
Yeah, we need to talk about that. We got to have you back and maybe do an extended series on that subject matter. But tell me more about the app, if you will, and let's let people let's go through a few more features and how people might use it, and then let people know how they can find it. I know it's in the App Store, it's in Google Play. You can go get it both on Android and iOS. But I'd love to know to share with people a little bit more about the features.
So I'm going to say just a couple really quick things, and then I would like to hear Tyson's perspective as a teacher of Latin. So the Psalms will forever be free on the app, thanks to the generosity of our donor Matthew. But if you want to subscribe to help support this, Byzantine effort, you can subscribe. I think it's $5.99 a month, and that would get you the Gospel of Mark and other things. So the Gospel of Mark is also available. And we also have a surprise coming, the Symbola Christiana Antiqua et Graeca et Latina et Anglica, which means the ancient Christian creeds in Greek, Latin, and English. So this is the text in Greek of the apostles, Nicene, Athanasian creeds, and the symbol of Chalcedon. Then those 4 texts in Latin as well, and then in English, with my reading all of them, so you can listen to them if you want to. And the idea is that if you want to become familiar with the languages of the church, specifically if you want to be a student of the history of the church, it's really helpful to access the creeds in the languages in which they were originally written. Now, the careful listener will note that the Athanasian Creed was not written in Greek. It is only in Latin. However, James Ussher, a well-known name, made a translation of the Athanasian Creed into Greek in the 16th century, late 16th, early 17th. And so Adrian, one of our research assistants, found a copy of this, and she dutifully transcribed it from Greek into, Greek that's manipulable digitally. And then we double-checked it, and so that's going to be available soon. And the other feature is that my good friend Joseph Tipton, who is a brilliant Hellenist, he speaks Greek more capably than I speak English, as well as Latin. He wrote, Tyson can testify to this, Joseph wrote a little letter for us called the Rati Uncula ad lectorum a Tiptonio composita, which means Tipton's little letter to the reader. So this is an original Latin composition. It's about 1.5 pages, which he wrote to introduce this app. And then he gave his translation, and I read the Latin version of it, and so that's going to be on the app too. Now you might say, what in the world is that, right? Well, the goal is to try to draw people into the Republic of Letters, right? Which is the world that Calvin and Beza and Erasmus and these other men, it's the world they moved in. And so they were, fascinated by languages and history, and they used those things in the service of the church. We're trying to similarly get people interested in these topics.
That's tremendous. I appreciate that. I'm excited. I hope people that are listening are as well. But let's follow up on your earlier question, David, to hear about Tyson and his work as a Latin teacher, Latin educator. I'm wondering how this app or resources like it, prove useful for teaching young people Latin as well.
Sure, yeah. Well, the best way to develop reading fluency in Latin is to read at the rate of speech. So in order to do that, you need to find audio recordings of text. So that's one of the ways I think that this app could be really helpful in assisting people to gain reading fluency. Because, when a text is being read aloud, you're forced to read along at the rate of speech, not getting bogged down by this or that little detail, but that's the best way to gain reading fluency, I think, anyways. And so having the digital text along with the recordings, I think, could prove really useful. Another thing that I think is really neat is, like David and Joan were saying, we have multiple, Protestant translations of the Bible in Latin. And one thing that I really like doing, because I'm a big nerd actually, is to compare them. And so if you want to develop your vocabulary, if you want to expand your vocabulary, look at the same passage translated by several different authors.
Oh, sure.
And you can see that there are many, many ways to express the same idea using different verbs. That's something I do regularly. And you can just open at random to Beza's New Testament and compare it to Calvin, compare it to the Vulgate and other things. And so as a teacher, that's one way I try to encourage my students to increase their vocabulary.
Wow. Yeah. Have you learned any new words recently or anything that really sticks out to you as interesting? Do you have any favorite new Latin words?
Any favorite new Latin words? I learned the word laminae recently. It means chip. So yeah, that's interesting to anybody. Laminae. My daughter, her favorite Latin word is bubo.
Yeah.
That's a Netflix cartoon.
The owl, right? Bubo bubonus. Yeah.
And now when we go on a walk, she says, "Hey, amus. Hey, amus. Let's go.
Let's go. Hey, amus." That's good.
Well, I have not been studying Latin. I need to. I should. But I did learn a new German word today. It's chic, but it's just the French word chic. It means stylish, but they spell it SCHICK, the way a German would spell it, right?
So it's a transliteration. The Germans are transliterating French words.
Yeah, the English, here in English, we just whatever. Well, how do the French spell it? Let's spell it that way, but not the Germans. They got to translate it. Are there any other things you'd like to mention, David, or other questions you'd love to ask of your colleagues?
Let's see. Well, I want to know, I guess here I'll really put them on the spot.
Yeah.
Are you enjoying the work? Are you enjoying the work?
You can't ask that.
Tyson, and how soon will you have Exodus done? That's the other question. Come on.
Yeah, Exodus, when you get into the Old Testament books, that's when it gets really interesting because there's so many, Hebrew names and things like that.
Oh.
And so that can become very time consuming.
Mm.
I do enjoy it. One of the things I enjoy the most about the work is there's an element of textual criticism involved.
Mm.
Because sometimes if you're reading Dr. Weaver's text, you come across a verb and you think to yourself, this actually doesn't fit in the sequence of the narrative, and then you go check, Skipper, and you realize, oh yeah, the authoritative text, so to speak, has a different tense of verb, and so there's an element of that I really enjoy a lot.
Mm.
Wow.
Yeah. I won't put Joan on the spot because she'll say I'm throwing her under the bus again. So
No, I want to talk. I just enjoy reading and listening to the scriptures.
Mm-hmm.
Again, your Latin I find very beautiful. And to come home from a long, challenging day, sit down with a cup of coffee and listen to a recording is just so appealing. But I also enjoy missing mistakes and getting corrected by you. You're so nice about it. You run across something, you think it's wrong, you point it out, and usually it's my fault, and I'm embarrassed, and I apologize.
No.
And but then sometimes we get into little arguments over things.
Right.
Where you think it should be one way, I think it should be something else. So
we
we have this little argument in the comments in the document, and
who's
of course
your arbitrator?
I always lose, but I always learn something too.
Yeah,
so
I don't
enjoy
know.
that. I enjoy that back and forth a lot.
Mm.
I don't know who the arbitrator would be, but one of the great contributors as well, in addition, to my daughter and April, the programmer, and Mishka, who does all the audio work, is this young woman, Adrienne, who lives here in the state of Michigan. And, she didn't agree to have her last name mentioned, so I won't. But, she's in the credits on the app. So, but anyway, she did a massive amount of work on the Aerosmith translation for Chavin Dixhorn.
ARROW, just for
that's
people.
Correct. That's correct. Yeah,
Inside
Plans
joke.
for Holy War. And she's a great scholar too, and has contributed a lot to this. So
That's amazing.
Hopefully, God willing, we'll just continue releasing about one book per month. So Mark is done, it's out. April's finishing the subscription version on the Apple platform. If someone out there is listening and says, I really like this and I want the whole of it to be free, and someone wants to donate money to finish the project, then the whole thing could be free, because the goal is not to enrich ourselves, but there are a lot of costs for these people's time, and it's a lot of work. So
right, so we definitely appeal if there's the patron or people that are interested in the subject. What's the best way for them perhaps to contact you, David, to discuss further some opportunities for the project?
Sure. Well, very foolishly, my phone number and email address are all over the internet. So it's easy to find, but info@latinperdiem.com is probably the best one.
Or turn on the Noe signal across
correct.
Lake Michigan, and he will appear.
That's right. Yeah.
Wow, that's great. I really appreciate that. Again, you can head over to latinperdiem.com/CLB, the letters CLB, as in Calvin's Latin Bible, and you'll be able to find out more information about the project, as well as find links to downloading the app on Android or iOS, your Apple phone or tablet, perhaps.
That's correct.
And you can find out all the other resources there as well while you're there. Browse around Latin Per Diem and watch some videos, but get connected. There's all sorts of things. Do you have any events that are coming up, or any courses? Yeah.
Well, I would like to say one other thing about the app, if you will.
Oh,
if you
please.
tolerate me, and that is, we're very soon going to add packs for other languages. So
Oh.
right now there's Latin, but then
Yeah.
the translation is either ESV or KJV.
Oh.
But coming soon, the app is in Latin, but then the other translations will be French, German, Portuguese, Korean, and hopefully
Wow.
eventually Mandarin.
So this is all localized. Wow.
Right.
This
So that means
is
that
huge.
if you're not an English speaker,
Yeah.
you can learn Latin via your own language.
Right.
So there's no need to have English in order to use the app. That's
Right.
my goal. So
Yeah.
our goal, so that it can have the, the broadest possible
Sure.
reach. That's the idea.
Wow. That's amazing. That's amazing. Well, keep
Yep.
it up. This is really significant. I admire you all and your work and your tireless effort. But also it's so important, and just, seeking, this kind of a renaissance of this significant, important language. Joan, you mentioned something earlier, just in terms of, I forget the precise phrase you used, but it was just speaking about the significance and the importance of Latin for our theological tradition. It's really the backbone of it. And that's absolutely true. And it's not just true for systematicians, but for all scholars, biblical scholars, other people. If you truly want to know what Reformed people and Christians in general have thought throughout the ages, Latin is one of, if not the most important language to know for centuries, and then so significant. Tyson.
If I could say something about that, when I was in seminary, I discovered PRDL. And I remember going on there for the first time and just being mind blown and thinking to myself, so the only thing that's stopping me from accessing the entire, Reformed and early modern theological tradition is that I don't know Latin.
Right.
And so that day, I set out to start learning.
You learned Latin that day.
Well, not all in one day, but
you began the journey. Mm-hmm.
The amount of literature that gets opened up to you through the study of Latin. So,
amen.
If that fires people up, they need to.
Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's great to have the audio as well. I'm not exclusively one of those kind of auditory learners, but that's kind of my preferred mode often.
Sure.
Probably why I like podcasting so much and listening to lectures and that sort of thing. But
yeah, you can turn the audio.
Language,
you can turn the audio
everything
off, right? You can turn the audio off. I don't especially like to listen to myself, but if you just want to read, the text, you can do that, and you can search the text too. So where did Calvin use the word misericordia, mercy? Where in the Psalms, or maybe in the whole scriptures? It's very interesting to note that justitia, righteousness, does not occur in the Psalms as much as one would expect in Calvin's translation. So that's there as well. So in terms of use, my pronunciation isn't perfect, but it's pretty consistent, and Joan's always checking me. So if you listen to this, you're going to get a very consistent, mostly accurate way to pronounce Latin, which is really important in order to gain confidence in the language.
One perhaps final specific question for you, but off the top of your head, I'm not asking for some scholarly defense or authoritative statistical answer, but just curious, what does Calvin use to translate chesed often?
Covenant?
Faithfulness. Yeah. Well, the faithfulness is the Lord's steadfastness. How does what does he use? A variety of words? Do any of you remember or
now
have
he's getting
thoughts
thrown under the bus? I think there's a series of synonyms like caritas.
I imagine he probably uses a bunch of words for it.
Joan, do you remember caritas, misericordia? It looks like you're searching, which was what I was
No.
gonna do.
I was struck by his use of the word clementia.
Oh yeah.
Where the Vulgate and modern Roman Catholic translations, like in Psalm 51, I think, use misericordia, something like that. So clementia was one that stood out to me, although I'm not sure exactly what the Hebrew was in those those verses.
Wow. Well, we'll look into it. Maybe that's a
rich
follow-up
vein.
for round two. Yeah,
a rich vein here of research for anybody who wants to easily find out, how Calvin took these different terms. The app will do that for you.
Yeah, that's really cool. That's really cool. Well, thank you all very much. This has been fun. I love hearing about this. Again, everyone can find out more information by visiting latinperdiem.com/CLB. Thank you, Tyson and Joan and David. It's amazing to have this team together, and we know there are more people involved in this project, but thanks for taking the Friday afternoon to join me today and to share this with all of our listeners. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
We'll put all the links and information necessary in the episode description, and I'll go back and add them to the YouTube video as well, so people can follow up. But David, I believe you mentioned it was info@latinperdiem.com might be a key place or a key way for you to email the project. Right. So if there are any people of means or just people who are interested in talking of some ways of supporting the project and the bigger picture of Latin fluency, especially within our theological tradition, then head on over to info@latinperdiem.com by sending an email. And I'm sure David would love to speak about that. But we want to thank everybody for watching, taking the time to join us on a Friday afternoon. I'm going to be at Presbyterian next week, so we likely will not have a Reform Forum live for March 14th. And then I'm heading to Europe for a Reform colloquium on the 21st, but I'll see what I can do. I'm hopefully going to bring some live episodes or dip in with some brief intros. I'm going to be meeting up with Kurt Federley, among other people. The people who follow Reform Forum might know Kurt. He's an ERKWB minister in Basel, Switzerland. So, David, we might be able to stop by. I don't know what's over there. Ecolampadius' old apartment. I don't know.
I've never been to Basel. I'd really love to see it.
Well, if I'm there, and I might pop into the YouTube live and show some strange landmarks from the Reformed faith if I could. But anyway,
house lamp, right?
The house lamp. Yeah, the Reformed house lamp. We love him. He's a good figure. Thanks everybody for watching. We're going to go offline. We really appreciate it, and we'll see you next time on Reformed Forum Live. Thank you. All right, we're stopping. Thanks, everyone. That was really fun.